What's up guys, Lon here from Android Authority, and the successor to the Moto Z Play is here, and it brings along some new friends and some new improvements. But are all of these changes for the better, and is it still one of the best mid-range phones that you can buy? This is the Moto Z2 Play. The biggest change with this year's Z2 Play that you'll notice right off the bat is the design is a little bit different. It's a little thinner, 1mm thinner to be exact, giving it a much sleeker feel in the hand, and the back is now all metal, which is a huge improvement over the fingerprint prone glass back of the original Z Play. Otherwise, the overall design and form factor is practically the same as last year, and it sort of had to be for one simple reason: the Moto Mods. Motorola has refreshed the Moto Mods with the release of the Z2 Play, but if you have last year's Moto Mods, these will all fit and work perfectly fine, just like Motorola promised. Motorola is guaranteeing compatibility of the Moto Mods with their phones for 3 years, so you could probably save yourself some cash by buying last year's mods if you're looking to invest in them for the first time. Despite shaving off an entire millimeter, there's still plenty of space for a headphone jack, so nothing to be worried about there, but this thinner body did come with one compromise. The battery capacity has dropped from 3510 mAh on the original Z Play to 3000 mAh. The Z2 Play is not going to get you the 2 days of battery life that the Z Play did, but it can still last a solid day to a day and a half. That's well above average and more than what you typically get on most other Android phones. I never struggled to get through a full day even with heavy use, and I would usually end the day with anywhere between 25 to 40% battery left. So if battery life was your main concern, there's nothing to be worried about here. It's still exceptionally good, and it supports Motorola's turbo power charging, which can quickly get you a 50% charge in only 30 minutes. You won't find a whole lot of bells and whistles on the Z2 Play. After all, this is a mid-range device. It's not IP certified against water and dust in any way, but it does have a water repellent nano coating, so it is at the very least resistant to the occasional splash. Audio also isn't all that great on the Z2 Play, at least not without resorting to a Moto Mod. There's only one speaker embedded in the earpiece, and while I do appreciate that it is a front-firing speaker, it doesn't get very loud, and because it's just a mono speaker, you get a very lopsided listening experience when using the phone in landscape. The fingerprint sensor has been redesigned with the same oval shape that we initially saw earlier this year on the G5 Plus. It works great at unlocking the phone with reliability and speed, but in addition to that, you can use various different gestures to move around the OS in place of the on-screen navigation buttons. This is great if you want to maximize the screen real estate, but there is a bit of a learning curve to using one button for everything. Just like last year's Moto Z Play, you've got a 5.5-inch 1080p screen, and it is an AMOLED screen, so colors are vibrant with deep dark blacks. Viewing angles are also quite nice, and in most situations, it looks pretty good. It's spacious enough for comfortably browsing the web and playing games, but it's not that bright, so it is tough to see under direct sunlight even at max brightness. Inside, it's got the newer Snapdragon 626 processor with either 3 or 4 GB of RAM depending on storage, and there is a micro SD card slot if you need more than what the phone offers internally. The Verizon model is currently only being offered in the 3 GB version, and that's the one I've been using for the past week. It performs well with general everyday tasks like opening apps, browsing the web, and checking emails. It does tend to drop frames from time to time when playing more graphically intense games. It's not something you'll notice very often because for the most part the experience is very smooth, and I never found the occasional drop frame to be much of a distraction. Of course, software plays a huge role in the way this phone performs. You'll find Android 7.1.1 Nougat on board, but what I love most about Motorola's software is that they keep everything very close to stock while only adding in a few software tweaks that enhance the experience. You still get all of Motorola's software additions like the double chop to turn on the flashlight, wrist twist to launch the camera, and the ever so useful battery-friendly notifications that fade in and out with the Moto display. If you get this phone on Verizon, you will have to deal with Verizon's entire suite of bloatware applications and a few other pre-installed third-party apps like NFL Mobile and Slacker Radio. This won't be a problem on the unlocked model, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense why Verizon still insists on bogging down their phones with extra bloatware when pretty much all of it is already being offered by Google for free. Another improvement that Motorola has made to this year's Z2 Play is with the camera. They have reduced the number of megapixels down to 12 in favor of larger pixels, and the camera now has a much wider f1.7 aperture. This certainly helps with brighter images in low light, but the camera still has to resort to the slowest shutter speed possible and high ISOs that are typically around 1000 or higher, which results in a lot of noise. The camera is slower to capture in low light, especially when using HDR, and without optical image stabilization, don't expect the photos to have very much sharpness or detail. Colors are also very washed out and highlights are overblown with a lot of J.J. Abrams lens flares. Photos in good lighting conditions are certainly better with better color accuracy and detail, but they still lack sharpness, and properly exposed highlights is just as problematic as it is in low light. The camera is sufficient, but the results are definitely nowhere near as good as what you would get from a more expensive flagship. The front-facing camera, on the other hand, pretty much remains unchanged from last year. It's a 5-megapixel f2.2 lens with a front-facing flash, and the front-facing flash does a decent job of illuminating your face without being overly harsh, but it does cause a lot of the details in the background to get crushed that you're almost better off without it. Currently, the Moto Z2 Play is an exclusive to Verizon, and if you buy it between now and July 26th, the Jbl Sound Boost Moto Mod is included for free. If you're not on Verizon, there's an unlocked version coming later this summer for $500. That's a $50 increase over last year's model, and that's pretty high considering this is a mid-range phone. At this price, you might be thinking, why not buy the OnePlus 5 instead? And you wouldn't be wrong to think that way. It's being offered for roughly the same price, and it's a much more powerful smartphone, so in a lot of ways it is the better purchase, especially if you're looking purely at just the phones themselves. The real differentiator, of course, is the Moto Mods, and that's what it boils down to. It depends on how much you value the Moto Mods and potentially how invested you already are in the Moto Mod ecosystem if you're coming from a previous Moto Z, that it wouldn't make sense to switch to another device that didn't support them. Another thing to consider is the fact that the Moto Mods still aren't cheap, and most of the things that the Moto Mods do, you can find third-party accessories that are not only cheaper, but also work with all of your devices. There's still nothing out there that's quite as sleek or unique as the Moto Mods, but what you're really paying for here is the convenience factor. Don't get me wrong, the Z2 Play is a great mid-range phone that does a lot of things well on its own, but in order to truly make it worth your while, you need to invest in more than just the phone itself. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this review of the Moto Z2 Play. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. We definitely appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell while you're at it so you don't miss out on future videos. And check us out on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Google+. All that good stuff will be linked down below. And check the website as well, androidauthority.com, because we are your source for all things Android.